Hello, welcome to this panel discussing the early stage private capital investments in the blue economy. My name is Dennis Fritsch, and I lead the blue economy and ocean finance work at the UN Environment Finance Initiative. We work with financial institutions like banks, insurers, and investors to develop standards and guidelines for financing a sustainable blue economy. But what is the blue economy and why is it important? The ocean covers over 70% of our planet. I think someone is typing in the background. Just to highlight, yes. Okay, sorry. So I just wanted to give you a quick introduction on what is the blue economy and why it is important. The ocean covers over 70% of our planet and is home to 80% of all life, making it the largest ecosystem on Earth. But not only that, the ocean regulates the global climate, acts as the largest natural carbon sink, and produces only around half the oxygen we breathe. Seafood and other marine organisms provide the primary source of protein for almost 3 billion people, and coral reefs and mangrove forests act as natural barriers protecting coastal communities from storms and floods. All these goods, services, and economic activities we derive from the ocean are estimated to be equivalent to the world's 7th largest economy in GDP terms. Some estimates even set the annual value of ocean assets at $2.5 trillion US, and major global industries either depend on or impact the ocean's health. And this is especially true for the African continent, which has 30,500 kilometers of coastline. These topics are very relevant right now for the activities of financial institutions globally. One just has to look at the front pages of news outlets over the last months, be it an oil spill off the pristine coast of Mauritius, a large-scale explosion in a port in Beirut, or a public outcry over illegal fishing fleets. Mismanaged marine industries and economic activities with a negative impact on the ocean are receiving ever more coverage and climb up the agenda of governments, financial institutions, and society as a whole. It really has become clear that the business as usual option is no longer an option. So there is a need for change in our approach to ocean assets, for a transition towards a sustainable way of managing ocean resources. This is where the concept of the blue economy comes in, and the leverage financial institutions have takes center stage. It highlights that sustainability cannot be separate from economic activities and growth, but is a condition for both. Within the blue economy, there are traditional maritime industries which are not very sustainable in their current state and which need financing to transition, especially if they want to remain competitive industries going forward. And there are others which are already on the right track. However, these require support to scale sustainable business models. But this is not only an environmental challenge, it is also an economic opportunity. A sustainable blue economy does go hand in hand with economic health and financial performance. And today, with our stellar panel of experts, we want to focus on these transformative opportunities and companies with innovative solutions to ocean challenges, and what role private capital has, especially in the early stages of growth. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. Please welcome Maren Hjorth-Bauer, founder and managing director at Find Ocean Ventures, Maëlys Carraro, managing director at Catalyst Fund and VFA Global, Serin Madurai, investment analyst at WWF, and Christian Lim, managing director and co-founder at Blue Oceans Partners, who it seems like has trouble to reconnect. Before we start, I just wanted to remind everyone on the line and listening in that we will try as much as possible to answer questions from the audience. So please do send us these via the chat, and the organizers will share them with us. So we try to answer them as quickly as we can. Also, this session is a 40-minute session, and we'll have a panel discussion now. And it seems Christian might be on the line. But I will start with Serin in this case. Serin, I know you've been working around the topic of early stage capital for a while, and it would be great to hear from you a bit more about the process of investing and providing capital, especially impact capital, and why this particularly needed in the blue economy and what it has to offer. Over to you, Seren.
Thanks, Dennis. Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you to Ocean Hub and all the organizers for inviting me here today. It's a great pleasure to be here. I grew up on the east coast of South Africa, and now I live in Cape Town. My grandfather was a fisherman. He lived in a fishing village just off the coast of Durban. So fishing is in my blood. The ocean is in my blood, and I'm very passionate about this cause. So it's great to be here today. And working for WWF, the sustainability challenges that are facing the ocean, and you alluded to them earlier today, are quite massive. So from overfishing and invasive alien species, habitat destruction, pollution, of which plastic has become really topical recently, as well as the overarching threat from climate change. So there's quite significant challenges that we face to sustaining our oceans, which is why I think the role of private capital is so massive. If we look at the philanthropic and grant capital and development pools of assets compared to the private sector, those grant spaces are much smaller in terms of their size. So if we want to grow businesses and the amount of businesses and the scale of businesses that speak to sustainable oceans, then we need to start accessing the private capital markets. So, there's been fantastic work done using, grant capital and development capital, and we need to acknowledge that the work of scientists done in the past has given us quite a nice base, a huge base of work to build off of. But it's the scale of the challenges means that we require private sector investment, or we require new kinds of solutions to solve these challenges. Impact with commerce and commerce with impact is a really great theme for one with which private sector can actually jump on, because there's also demand from shareholders and there is demand from clients that more capital be allocated to have an impact, not just focus on financial returns as we've done in the past. So this momentum is growing. I think been a 12 to 17% per annum increase in the impact investing space, as was reported by the Global Impact Investors Network annual survey. You're seeing more and more financial institutions have an appetite for getting impact solutions on the ground. So the appetite is there, but one of the key hurdles has been this risk return characteristics of many impact businesses. So the risk is too high, or the return is too low, or these two things combined, which makes it very unattractive for private sector capital. There's also this issue around the size of businesses. So we're talking here about kind of startups and very small businesses, but there's also very large businesses, and there's that missing middle where some businesses are too small for early stage capital and too big for or too big for early stage capital and too small for a later stage capital. So what's been happening in the trend we've been part of at WWF is blending finance. So blended finance is using philanthropic and grant capital to catalyze private sector investment in the space. And this trend we've been seeing growing. And it's kind of one of the reasons why Alexi invited me to be part of this panel today, because WWF has been working on the Green Outcomes Fund, which is impact investing solution, first of its kind structure for the African continent. And it's an outcomes-based payment model in which we incentivize local private equity managers, local impact managers, local financial institutions to invest in green businesses or environmentally friendly businesses and prove that they have a positive impact, and which we will trigger an outcome payment to them as an incentive for achieving these environmental impacts. And this is just one type of blended finance solution that we're part of. We're also working with the Development Bank of South Africa on a climate finance facility, which is another blended finance facility that's looking at larger deal sizes. Then, this work that we're doing with Ocean Hub Africa is another example of where we can kind of source out that pipeline, which I think is another, I wouldn't say barrier, but it's an important piece that needs to come into the puzzle for that private sector capital. There's a need for solutions and platforms that bring the financiers and the and the businesses together, which I think is why blended finance is a helpful first step in getting that catalyzing effect of private sector capital to bring on more kinds of blue ocean businesses. I think another good example is the Seychelles Blue Bond, in which I think about $15 million was raised by the government, and that was there was blended finance element there because the Global Environmental Facility provided capital, and there were some guarantees provided by the World Bank. But private sector capital financial institutions were the lead book runners and arrangers, and the underwriters were all private sector institutions. So there's this coming together of the private sector, the scientists, the people that are passionate about the blue ocean, and these are meeting in the marketplaces, and where we've struggled to unlock and catalyze investment before, new innovative solutions are coming to the fore. And I think where there's a new kind of trend about commerce with impact and impact from commerce, and these solutions are definitely able to be scaled up by private sector capital.
Yes, exactly. So, Saren, actually, that is a very good point you make. And we do have a great private sector experience on this panel. So this is a perfect lead on to Chris, who has managed to join us, I see, which is great. So Chris, I think linking this, blended finance is kind of the first step and early stage to cover early stage capital. But from your side as a fund manager, why is the blue economy of interest for you, and what are the opportunities that you and trends that you are seeing at the moment in this space?
Yeah, I mean, we see two very large opportunities. One is an impact opportunity, and the second one is a outstanding business opportunity. So on the impact side, given the critical central role that the ocean plays in our planetary ecosystem, we see opportunities to restore the role of the ocean as the primary engine for climate regulation, a primary source of food for our populations, and there is at the moment a number of threats for the ocean, like overfishing, which are reaching proportions and dynamics that are really tragic for the ocean and for us. So investing in solutions to address this is an opportunity to invest in solutions that can address very fundamental problems for our planet and for us. So that's one aspect. And the second one is on the business opportunities. If you look at some of the key sectors of the blue economy, they have a number of things in common. First, they are very large markets. If you take seafood, for instance, it's a $350 billion market. They are growing very fast and also driven by very strong fundamentals. If you, again, just taking this example of seafood, consumption of seafood is driven by population growth, but also increase in average income. And this leads to, growth of some sectors, like subsectors of seafood, like aquaculture, of 7-8% per year. So that's one of the fastest growing sectors in the world. And at the same time, alongside those two drivers I've mentioned, there's an immense opportunity for improvements in productivity, because the way we're still using very old techniques and practices to, again, in the same example, to farm fish, for instance. And so we have, for instance, when we farm a fish in a fish cage, for 2 years, we may not know, by how much the fish has grown and how many fish you have in the cage. Well, if you're farming today, cattle, you know exactly how many cattle you have. And so this is really basic information we don't have. And that leads to very fundamental productivity issues. And so you can have, in some industries, like in the shrimp industry, you can have 50% mortality rate. You can waste 20-30% of the feed that you provide. And these are opportunities for amazing improvements in productivity. You can do this by leveraging, without necessarily reinventing the wheel. You can reuse innovations that come from precision agriculture, for instance, and apply it to aquaculture. Or you can use, just apply the new technologies such as computer vision, and artificial intelligence in general, and Internet of Things. And so you can actually leapfrog from a technological perspective and achieve those productivity gains in a very efficient manner. And that translates into amazing, investment opportunities in a large growing market, as I was saying. So you can combine, it's a unique, I think the ocean space is really unique in the sense that you can combine both systemic impact, as I was saying at the beginning, and at the same time, size, incredible and massive business opportunities.
Thanks very much, Chris. Actually, as you said, aquaculture and sustainable fisheries are two of the kind of prime examples of how the blue economy can be an opportunity for investors. And that leads nicely on to our next speaker, Maëlys. It's really critical if you want to attract private capital to de-risk these projects, and also from the founder side to ensure a funding continuum. Can you tell us a bit more about your experience of this process? And I know you also have a background in fintech, where there might be lessons to be learned for the blue economy. Over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dennis. So what everyone said so far definitely resonated with me, because I really strongly believe that we are in an ecosystem, like we are in a space with tremendous opportunity, but it's a nascent ecosystem, right? And so in order to really build up the ecosystem, and you need to think about what needs to be in place to really catalyze, as Seren was saying, that the private capital in this space, right? And so our model at Catalyst Fund, which is actually a global accelerator for early stage inclusive tech solutions across emerging markets, is precisely to do that. So we started this facility with support from the Gates Foundation 5 years ago, and JP Morgan, and recently the UK government. And our mission was really to create a facility that could fill the talent gap and the capital gaps, recognizing that capital is actually only one side of the equation, which is something that I think we don't talk about enough. It's not enough for capital to be flowing. You need to have demonstration of cases of successful entrepreneurs that have made it in order to attract also more talent and more innovative ideas. And to do that, we think that this combination could enable the growth of innovative solutions and also de-risk those investments for commercial investors, right? And there's so many entrepreneurs, and I was one myself actually for a period of time out there, that have incredible ideas, but often fail to really see the light of day because they can access the capital and they can access the right team and talent at the right time. So, I think that this is where, as Seren was saying, blended capital structure come really handy, but also where we need to think about what else along, in the ecosystem needs to be in place to make sure that these entrepreneurs and these ventures have an environment that is favorable and enabling their growth. And so this is what we do. For example, we offer grants at the very beginning of their journey. And we couple that with very hands-on and bespoke venture building support, which is very technical. So our team of product managers and scientists and researchers really plugs in, and for 6 months becomes an extension of the startup team, and with them kind of develops the solutions that we think are needed, and in a way that we think could work for underserved population, because that's the other dimension. Oftentimes, ventures remain, more at the sort of middle income customer level. And what we're really trying to do is also making sure that they work for everybody. And that's where the innovation has the highest potential. For example, small scale fishers that depend right on fisheries as their primary livelihood, or other smallholder farmers, for example, in the agriculture space. I think what's also interesting is that we started working initially in fintech, as you said, so fintech for financial inclusion. And today we're seeing that our approach can actually really be catalytic and helpful in other industries. So we're looking to expand, for example, in enabling access to basic and essential services, in the climate resilience and adaptation space, so really focusing on the small-scale fishers, for instance, because at the end of the day, this combination can really be a catalyzer of so much more. And if you look at the fintech industry 5 years ago, right, there weren't as many emerging market companies like that were making waves. We were witnessing maybe the growth of mobile money in sub-Saharan Africa at the time, like after obviously the success of M-Pesa that started around 2007. There was a rising smartphone penetration. We're enabling regulation, a young, a population like ready to capture these opportunities. So I think it's a perfect cocktail we're in this moment. And that's when VC capital and commercial capital started flocking in. And with that, attracting more enterprises as well, more entrepreneurs that started to pop up. And 5 years ago, frankly, it was really hard to come by any real numbers of VC funding invested, right, in the continent. And today, you look at fintech and you have a sector with over $100 billion invested, of which $2 billion went to Africa last year. And we're seeing major success stories. Paystack acquired by Stripe with $200 million, InterSwitch, right, acquired by Visa, Chipper Cash, it's a peer-to-peer, company also raising $30 million just recently. It's a company in our portfolio. So, and even on our small space, like our companies went on and raised over $100 million in funding. We've worked with 37 companies to date, and 90% are still in operation thanks to these mechanisms. And I think the blue economy sector can follow a similar trajectory, but we're very early. So we both need risky capital and patient capital that can catalyze, private capital later on, but also a lot more risky innovation. And that's where this combination of think talent and other ecosystem inputs becomes really crucial.
Thanks very much for sharing that, Marlies. Actually, perfect lead on to our next speaker, Maren, who is working at exactly what the next step, right? Growth funding is the magic word, and also kind of what does the deal pipeline, how has that evolved over the last years? I mean, Maren, you've been involved for a number of years now in the blue economy sector specifically, so it'd be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Dennis. And I agree with all of you on this panel. And I think we are at an inflection point now, which is exciting to be part of. Before starting Find that I'm currently building, I also founded and led Catapult Ocean, where we focus on earlier stage companies in the blue economy. And over the past years, following that space, we see an increasing number of clever engineers and entrepreneurs starting companies in this space. We see an increasing interest from established industry players to make use of new technology. We see an increasing interest from investors. So this is really interesting times. With Find now, we focus on growth funding for the same type of companies. And I think the role private capital can play here is really to be a strategic investor to some of these companies. So that's how we built Find as well, to play that role, to have a good network of both potential customers for these companies, with kind of technology and research institutions, mentors, and people around that can really support these companies when they have a proven technology, but when it's all about building their business. So building the right team, governance structures, business development, how to optimize their supply chain, really professionalize the companies to take it to the next level and scale. And I think that's really where private capital can play a role in combination with some of the other sources of capital. And I think to Chris's point here, I think the blue economy is a perfect example of how we can combine impact with superior financial returns based on some of the examples previously mentioned. And if we focus on Africa specifically, in Catapult Ocean, we've looked at, we see increasing numbers of blue tech startups out of Africa. We see some hubs emerging. Alex is here, played a great role in building Ocean Hub Africa. We see Kenya as well as playing an important role. Also Western Africa. And in Catapult Ocean, we've invested in a couple of companies out of Africa, and just I'll mention a couple of examples to make it more tangible. So we have Atlant Space, which is a Moroccan company that uses AI for drones to combat illegal fishing. We have Reinotech for Impact, that is democratizing the cold chain for aquaculture and fishery players to really make sure that we reduce waste, food waste in that supply chain. And I think a lot of other companies we've looked at in Catapult Ocean and in Fint have great potential to scale in Africa. That could be Desalinator as one example, fighting kind of the water crisis by desalination, using solar to do that without any ocean impact and so on. So I think just Africa is a great source for innovations, but also a very interesting market for a lot of these technologies. And I think just to end it, that building bridges between maybe more progressed ecosystems, like we, for example, have in Norway, with strong technology competence and long experience working with the ocean sectors, with Africa, is really important as well.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Maren. I mean, it sounds from what you've been saying, the blue economy is a great opportunity for investment. Yet we don't see that many investors actually getting engaged in this space. And I think that's what one comment came through from the audience is about, how do we get traction? How do we build up a track record? That's something that at UNFFI we've noticed a lot, that investors need or like to see a track record of project, and that's exactly what all of you are building, which is great. But there must be other barriers for investors. So I would like to go back to Christian. What do you think is needed to attract, or what change do you think is needed to attract more institutional investors to this space? You're on mute, Chris. Yep, now.
Okay, I think it should be fine. Yeah, can you hear me?
All good.
Okay, good. Thanks for Dennis and Alex for unmuting me. So focusing on innovation here, and attracting more capital to invest in innovations. I'd say one of the key bottlenecks we need to address is still the lack of understanding and expertise in the sector. Because investing in the blue economy, as we said, is a tremendous impact and return opportunity, but it's also complex. The ocean is a harsh environment. It's corrosive. There's bad weather. It's big, and so you need investors who develop this understanding of the environment and the knowledge, and therefore to really assess the opportunities and the risks. And those investors, are the ones, I think, who will help catalyze investment from more investors. And so that's a role we're trying to play as Blue Ocean's partners, being really experts, on innovations that can help regenerate ocean health. And that's also the work that Maren is doing with Fint. So we need more of these to develop this expertise and catalyze more investment. And I'll just give you one example, and because one example is, for instance, if there's a company that's we like, that is called Unseen Labs. It's a French company. They have developed a solution. They build and launch and operate nano satellites, and which enables them to monitor boat activity on the ocean and detect illegal fishing. This is an incredible innovation. They're the first ones in the world to be able to do this, and basically be able to say at any point in time, which boat is where and what is the identity of the boat. But to understand the opportunity, you need to understand the issues of illegal fishing, and you need to understand that, for instance, in many coasts of Africa, like the Guinean coast, they are massive fleets of foreign, fishing boats that are plundering the area, and has a huge economic cost. And because there's a huge economic cost, and in front of that, companies like Unseen Labs that bring a very efficient solution, then there's a huge economic, opportunity and impact opportunity. So you need to know this, to understand this, to be able to assess the opportunities. And so that's what investors like Find and Blue Ocean Partners try to bring to the market.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I completely agree with you, and that really mirrors as well my own experiences speaking with investors. There's a lot of education needed because the blue economy is at least the way we look at it holistically is a fairly nascent sector. There's another question around ensuring impact. I think that is a crucial one. Of course, we don't just want to make profit. Of course, we also want to ensure that what we're doing really is supporting a sustainable blue economy, right? So, Serin, could you give us some thoughts around how as an investor or a company involved in this space, how can you ensure impact and how can you measure it? Maybe even, I know that's maybe a tricky one.
Yeah, I mean, as Chris alluded to, the sector is very, very complex. So the education around it is definitely something that needs to be communicated in a simplified manner to people to understand. In our experience through the Green Outcomes Fund, we've developed a very specific M&E framework in which we can show how we plan to measure the impacts or outcomes. So if we have a trigger payment that's based on an outcome, well, we need to make sure that, well, the outcome's been achieved. And there's frameworks like the Global Impact Investors Network, the IRIS framework, and that's one kind of global best practice that I certainly look to in terms of frameworks for measuring impact. And having a look at that and having a very good idea of the process in which you will say that you will measure the impact that you're having. If you can communicate that to investors, then they'll have a certain level of comfort that you will actually achieve those outcomes, because investors are sophisticated allocators of capital, so they understand M&E frameworks, and if you can't communicate that clearly to your funder or your investor, then they're not going to take the risks. So there is places where one can learn or at least build on the best practice that's out there in terms of developing a solid methodology for measuring your impact and then communicating that to your funder or investor, and that in itself will actually help solve this challenge of communicating the impact. The secondary challenge is that while standardizing these frameworks, someone might measure their bycatch differently in one area or another area, or their biomass in one area differently than other. So that's just an example, but having a well-thought-out framework is definitely one way to address that problem of measuring impact and ensuring that impact has, and also having the proof available. So, you need some sort of evidence that's going to prove that, and everyone needs to agree up front what that evidence is going to be. And in the absence of that evidence, then the impact hasn't happened. And in the presence of it, then you can safely say that we've had an impact we wanted to achieve.
Great, thanks very much, Serin. I'm very conscious of time. Miley, sorry, yeah, please do chime in.
Yeah, Dennis, I was going to jump in with another observation about that, which is, measuring impact in order to report to investors is certainly one thing, and it's super important. But it's also important to recognize that often for early stage companies, especially, it's expensive, it's difficult to execute, and you just don't have the capacity at an early stage to have a team that runs, for example, an RCT study of sorts, right, to really understand what impact looks like. So what I also recommend often to our startup founders is to continuously talk to customers, because even at the beginning, that's your tool to really understand how you're really affecting somebody's life, like if it's a direct-to-consumer, for example, solution. And there's a lot of methodologies out there to do that. One that I highly recommend is called 60 Decibels. It's a company that actually runs these studies doing phone calls, for example, qualitatively, right, with the customers. So there's a quantitative side, but also qualitative side, and those stories that you get really by talking to the customer, often always, like getting those insights can really be incredibly helpful when communicating and telling your story to investors. So yeah, I guess another nuance and perspective to the impact measurement question.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Marlies, for these thoughts. Yeah, it's certainly a sector of growth and of a lot of interest from the investment side, which is great. I'm very conscious of time. What I would like to do at the end of this session is to really hand over to our panelists for some closing remarks, for some practical closing remarks, really. We want to cover the investment side as well as the company side of things. So I'd like Seren and Marlies to please share one piece of advice that you would give to founders who are currently looking for a private investment in this space. And I'd like to ask Christian, and maybe also on behalf of Maren, if you can, who seems to have dropped out, to share a piece of advice for investors wanting to get involved in the blue economy space. So let's start with Seren, then Marlies, and then Chris. Over to you. You've got 3 minutes left.
So thanks, Dennis. I'll try and be quick. So my one piece of advice would be to reduce the complexity when you're pitching to investors. Make sure that your business case is clear, your impact is clear, and that you can communicate it easily and quickly. And that's going to be the first hook to get investors interested in you. So that would be my. Over to you, Marlies.
Great. My advice would be to not rush and think that VC, venture capital money, is the type of capital that you need first and foremost to grow, but actually think creatively about what is the right capital, the right time of your journey. And especially now that we're seeing all this innovative structure, whether it's blended finance structure, grant first, then equity, then debt, or revenue-based models, do explore and figure out what is really, it will enable the growth of your business. That makes sense for you because especially in Africa, I don't think that the Silicon Valley VC model is the only model. So let's think outside the box.
Thanks very much. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. I think now we are, there's been really growing awareness of the blue economy opportunity for investors. And this is why you see investors, institutions like Credit Suisse partnering with Rockefeller to create a massive, ocean engagement fund. So I think this tells us a lot about, the general understanding of the opportunity. Now, when it comes to innovation, where we think a big part of the opportunity lies, I think we see more and more investors interested, but there is a strategic decision to be made, which is if you want to be serious about sizing the investment opportunity, the ocean investment opportunities, whether we're going to develop the the expertise in-house, and this is an investment. So please consider this. This is amazing if you want to do it. But if you don't want to do it because this is, let's say only a portion of your investment strategy, then consider partnerships and with investors who have developed this kind of expertise and are specialized in this space. So that would be my.
Thanks very much, Chris. So thanks very much. I know we've got 10 seconds left, but thanks very much to the speakers. Thanks very much for anyone tuning in. Any further questions, please send them to Ocean Hub Africa and they'll try and relay to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye. Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.